Haribo, namaste. My name is Janapati Das, and we are back in it to read another story from the Krishna book. Please accept my most humble respects to all of you who are listening. Please feel free, if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel, share the Krishna book stories with other people around the world that you know who would appreciate it. And as always, we're going to do some hearing and chanting of Krishna's names. As Lord Chaitanya says, all glories to the congregational chanting. And in this case, you are the congregation. This is known as Kirtan. We're doing a lot more of these videos because of COVID in the last few years, but usually Kirtan is done in a group, so feel free to play it and chant along. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Saraswarupa Haribo. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we were continuing on with our stories. We had finished in the last few different stories of the Rasa dance, and then of course several demons like Shankashura and Vijay. I was trying to forget the name of the different demons that were. There's so many demons, it's like you forget them. But of course, Shankashura was the son of Kuvera, and he was very puffed up with his opulence, just like Kuvera's other sons, Nakula and Manigriva, and just felt like, well, these boys don't deserve these beautiful women. I should have beautiful girls. I should have them myself and control them, because I'm, after all, a very important person. And this is the arrogance that oftentimes people with a lot of power or riches or wealth, they get into this. They become very puffed up with what they have, and they think, I am the creator of these things. They take on the role of being the supreme person, and but they're really insignificant. And oftentimes you see this in that they may have these powers, but then someone comes along and you wait, just at the moment with the weakness of this great leader at one time, then they come and they take over their position, like Mao. Like Mao was a very powerful leader of China, of the Communist Party. And then, but once he started getting sick, it's like soon Mrs. Mao moved in, and the Gang of Four, and it's a power struggle that these leaders are always afraid of losing their power and their strength, but they're so arrogant that they don't realize that their power and their strength and any kind of opulence that they have has come from Krishna and should be used in the service of Krishna. So even in the story of King Kamsa was always afraid of losing his power, losing his life to Krishna. And he heard this, this prophecy in the sky, as we've heard in the stories, that Krishna would kill him. So he was always thinking of Krishna in ways that he could try to stop this. But just like most people, we try to stop the onslaught of death that will come on, and we try so many means to keep it from coming, but it does come eventually. And even in this story, I was reading about this lady who was so afraid of death that she spent all of her money to protect herself by cybergenics. She decided she would freeze her husband and all the people that were going to die. They were dying, and decided to freeze them. And she said, "Oh, I'm going to freeze myself, so then science will pick up the ball and at some point and heal me of my diseases." But this is really foolish. And even if it were true, who really would want that, to be able to be in the material world in a suffering body that's continuously being suffering and eventually has to die? So this fear can be relieved by by true knowledge, by transcendental knowledge of ourself, and of us being transcendental spirit souls beyond death, beyond fear, in true love with our relationship with Krishna. So the greatest, as they say, death, where is thy sting, in the Bible. Once one understands this, there is no sting of death. No, people are not afraid of death. They just, they think of it as like, I'm changing my garment, or I'm giving up my garment, and I am actually free of this burden. So we are now reading a new chapter. So the Gopis' feelings of separation. The Gopis of Vrindavan were so attached to Krishna that they were not satisfied simply with the rasa dance at night. They wanted to associate with him and enjoy his company during the daytime also. When Krishna went to the forest with his cowherd boyfriends and cows, the Gopis did not physically take part, but their hearts went with him. And because their hearts went, they were able to enjoy his company through strong feelings of separation. To acquire the strong feeling of separation is the teaching of Lord Chaitanya, and is direct disciplic succession with the succession of Gopis. Sorry, succession of Goswamis. Let me read that whole sentence again, just to get it in its context. To acquire this strong feeling of separation is the teaching of Lord Chaitanya and his direct disciplic succession of Goswamis. And the Goswamis were, of course, the different. Goswami means Swami is the master or teacher, and Go is senses. So Goswami is the master of one's senses. So a true Goswami is one who is a living entity who controls their senses and utilizes them only in the service of Krishna and not in the service of oneself. So the opposite of a Goswami is a Godas. And it's like the slave or the servant of their senses. So, like my name is Janapati Das, and Janapati means the Lord of all people. And when you put the Das at the end, it means the servant. So I'm the servant of the Lord of all people, in other words, Krishna. So when we have Godas, it means that you are the servant of your senses, which is basically most people in this material world. But Goswami is actually a master of the senses. They control their senses. But the Goswamis of Lord Chaitanya were the different disciples. They were these direct disciples of Lord Chaitanya, Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, Raghunath Goswami, they're different Jiva Goswami, different Goswamis who wrote. And of course, Rupa Goswami famously wrote The Nectar of Devotion and The Nectar of Instruction, some of the books that Bhaktivedanta Swami has also translated. So really wonderful books. I recommend that you read them if you can get a copy of them from Bhaktivedanta translation. And the Goswamis, of course, were Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, Sri Krishna, in the mood of Radharani. He only wrote 8 prayers, and we've read some of the prayers. He could have written so many, but he instructed his disciples, the Goswamis, to write books about the science of bhakti. And so there are many, many books that they wrote that you can read. When we are not in physical contact with Krishna, we can associate him with him like the Gopis through feelings of separation. Krishna's transcendental form, qualities, pastimes, and entourage are all identical with him. There are 9 different kinds of devotional service. Devotional service to Krishna and feelings of separation elevates the devotee to the highest perfectional level, to the level of the Gopis. So there are 9 different kinds of devotional service. Some of the most chief ones, of course, are hearing and chanting and serving the Lord's lotus feet. There are many different kinds. You can actually find them in here. At one point, I'll get them and we can have them in one of the classes. But the chief, of course, is hearing of Krishna's names. It is stated in Srinivasacharya's prayer to the 6 Goswamis that they left the material opulences of government service and the princely status of life and went to Vrindavan, where they lived just like ordinary mendicants, begging from door to door. So the Goswamis were actually, they were ministers in the government of the I'm trying to think of the name of it. It was like the Muslim emperor, right? So they're very, very intelligent. They had a lot of money, but they left to go serve. They left the service of the Muslim emperor to go serve Krishna, and they gave everything they had, to half of it to the brahmanas and to the devotees, and the other way, there was a long story about how they escaped, and they basically paid off people along the way with whatever money they had. So when they came to Lord Chaitanya, they didn't have a single cent left, or a rupee. They were completely broke, but they were free. But they were so much enriched with the Gopis' feelings of separation that they enjoyed transcendental pleasure at every moment. Similarly, when Lord Chaitanya was at Jagannath Puri, he was in the role of Radharani, feeling the separation of Krishna. those who are in the disciplic succession of the Madhava Gaudiya Sampradaya. And a Sampradaya, so that's, this is a parampara. Sampradaya is a lineage, and there are like 5 main lineages, Vaishnava lineages. And they are spiritual master to disciple. We've talked about that a little bit. This is a parampara. This is the process by which spiritual knowledge is handed down about bhakti, about love for God. Okay, let me see where. He was in the role of Radharani, feeling the separation of Krishna. Those who are in the disciplic succession of the Madhava Gaudiya Sampradaya should also feel the separation of Krishna, worship his transcendental form, and discuss his transcendental teachings, his pastimes, his qualities, his entourage, and his associations. That's what we're doing here. The spiritual master should enrich the devotees to the highest devotional perfection. Feeling constant separation while engaged in the service of the Lord is the perfection of Krishna consciousness. The gopis used to discuss Krishna amongst themselves, and their talks were as follows. My dear friends, one gopi said, do you know that when Krishna lies on the ground, he rests on his left elbow, and his head rests on his left hand. He moves his attractive eyebrows while playing his flute with his delicate fingers. And so you can you can see Krishna back here. If you have a good look from where you are, you can see this. He moves his eyebrows, he's playing his flute. Very attractive. And the sound he produces creates such a nice atmosphere that the denizens of the heavenly planets who travel in space with their wives and beloved stop their airplanes, for they are stunned by the vibration of the flute. The wives of the demigods who are seated in the plains then become very much ashamed of their singing and musical qualifications. Not only that, but they become afflicted with conjugal love, and their hair and tightened dresses immediately loosen. Another gopi said, my dear friend, Krishna is so beautiful that the goddess of fortune always remains on his chest, and he is always adorned with a golden necklace. Beautiful Krishna plays his flute in order to enliven the hearts of many devotees. He is the only friend of the suffering living entities. When he plays his flute, all the cows and other animals of Vrindavan, although engaged in eating, simply take a morsel of food in their mouths and stop chewing. Their ears raise up and they become stunned. They do not appear alive, but like painted animals. Krishna's flute playing is so attractive that even the animals become enchanted, and what to speak of ourselves. Another gopi said, my dear friends, not only living animals, but even inanimate objects like the rivers and the lakes of Vrindavan also become stunned when Krishna passes with peacock feathers on his head and his body smeared with the minerals of Vrindavan. With leaves and flowers decorating his body, he looks like some hero. When he plays on his flute and calls the cows with Balaram, the river Jamuna stops flowing and waits for the air to carry the dust from his lotus feet. Beautiful. The river Jamuna is unfortunate like us. It does not get Krishna's mercy. The river simply remains stunned, stopping its waves, just as we also stop crying out of frustration for Krishna. In the absence of Krishna, the gopis were constantly shedding tears, but sometimes when they expected that Krishna was coming, they would stop crying. But when they saw that Krishna was not coming, they again would become frustrated and began to cry. Krishna is the original personality of Godhead, the origin of all Vishnu forms, and the cowherd boys are all demigods. Lord Vishnu is always worshipped and surrounded by different demigods like Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, Indra, Chandra, and others. When Krishna traveled through the Vrindavan forest or walked on the Govardhan hill, he was accompanied by the cowherd boys. While walking, he played his flute just to call his cows. Just by his association, the trees, plants, and other vegetation in the forest immediately became Krishna conscious. A Krishna conscious person sacrifices everything for Krishna. Although trees and plants are not very advanced in consciousness, by the association of Krishna and his friends, they became They also became Krishna conscious. They then want to deliver everything, whatever they have, their fruits, flowers, and the honey incessantly falling from their branches. When Krishna walked on the bank of the Jamuna, he was seen nicely decorated with tilak on his head. He was garlanded with different kinds of forest flowers, and his body was smeared by the pulp of sandalwood and tulasi leaves. The bumblebees became mad after the treasure and sweet nectar of the atmosphere. Being pleased by the humming sound of the bees, Krishna would play his flute, and together the sounds became so sweet to hear that the aquatics, the cranes, swans, and ducks, and other birds were charmed. Instead of swimming or flying, they became stunned. They closed their eyes and entered a trance of meditation and worship of Krishna. One gopi said, "My dear friend, Krishna and Balaram are nicely dressed with earrings and pearl necklaces. They enjoy themselves on top of Govardhan Hill, and everything becomes absorbed in transcendental pleasure when Krishna plays on his flute, charming the whole created manifestation. When he plays, the clouds stop their loud thundering out of fear of him. Rather than disturb the vibration of his flute, they respond with mild thunder, and so congratulate Krishna, their friend. Krishna is accepted as the friend of the cloud because both the cloud and Krishna satisfy the people when they are disturbed. When the people are burning due to excessive heat, the cloud satisfies them with rain. Similarly, when people in materialistic life become disturbed by the blazing fire of material pangs, Krishna gives them relief. The clouds and Krishna, having the same bodily color also, are considered to be friends. Desiring to congratulate its superior friend, the cloud poured not water but small flowers and covered the head of Krishna to protect him from the scorching sunshine. So beautiful. And it's a wonderful analogy, in the same way that a cloud relieves people, oftentimes Hawaii is a little bit different because it rains a lot here, but, it does get kind of warm and people are relieved when the rain, but, other places I've lived, California, when they have just day after day of drought and they're just praying for rain and the rain comes and they're so happy. And similarly, this material world is like a forest fire, and the things that we get, it's like we think that the result in the dry situation is to take matches and just or to throw logs on the fire. We think, oh, that'll just smother, and it does. Like when you throw a log on a fire, it seems to smother, but you give it a couple seconds, it's like just burns even more. So similarly, our material desires in this material world, they're just like burning fire. We continue to put more and more. We think that if we just suffocate it with more wood, it'll just put it out, but it doesn't. It just burns it more and more, but we feel more and more empty. So this is why we need the cooling rain of Krishna consciousness, to put out that burning fire that just creates misery in our life. One of the gopis told Mother Yashoda, "My dear mother, your son is very expert among the cowherd boys. He knows all the different arts, how to tend the cows and how to play the flute. He composes his own songs, and to sing them, he puts his flute to his mouth. When he plays either in the morning or in the evening, all the demigods like Lord Shiva, Brahma, Indra, and Chandra bow their heads and listen with great attention." Krishna is the ultimate musician. He's just like the ultimate musician, and he's a talented singer. He sings. He sings often. There's often reference, even in the last story, of Krishna singing to the gopis. We have the Bhagavad Gita, the Song of God. Krishna sings the Bhagavad Gita. It's very beautiful, beautiful. As a musician, I love that. And I think, when I first saw Krishna, being a flute player, I was like, oh, Krishna is a flute player. I want to learn lessons from him. So it's very beautiful. It's wonderful. Although they are learned and expert, they cannot understand the musical arrangements of Krishna's flute. Not even the demigods can understand that. They simply listen attentively and try to understand, but become bewildered and nothing more. Another gopi said, "My dear friend, when Krishna returns home with his cows, the footprint of the soles of his feet with flag, thunderbolt, trident, and lotus flower relieves the pain the earth feels when the cows transverse it. He walks in a stride, which is so attractive, and he carries his flute. Just by looking at him, we become lusty to enjoy his company. At that time, our movements cease. We become just like trees and stand perfectly still. We even forget what we look like." Krishna had many thousands of cows, and they were divided into groups according to their colors. They were also differently named according to color. I thought that's really interesting because people who have cows, cow herders, even when I lived as a Peace Corps volunteer, I lived in a cow community. They had cows, the Fulani people. They were cow herders, and they had so many names of cows. Like we have cow. That's it. We don't really have very many names in English, but they had so many names of cows based on different kinds of attributes of the cow, like the ones with the black spots or the one that had a certain shape of their body. They all had different names in Fulani that was to designate that. Similarly here, when he would return from his pasturing ground, he would find all the cows gathered. As Vaishnavas count 108 beads, which represent 108 individual gopis, so Krishna would also chant 108 different groups of cows. When Krishna returns, he is garlanded with tulasi leaves, the gopi described him to a friend. He puts his hand on the shoulder of a cowherd boyfriend and begins to blow his transcendental flute. The wives of the black deer become enchanted upon hearing the vibration of his flute, which resembles the vibration of the veena. The deer come to Krishna and become so charmed that they stand still, forgetting their homes and their husbands. Like us, who are enchanted by the ocean of transcendental qualities of Krishna, the she-deer become enchanted by the vibration of his flute. We got one more page. Let's see how much we are. Okay, all right, we're doing good. Another gopi told Mother Yashoda, "My dear mother, when your son returns home, he decorates himself with the buds of the kunda flower. Just to enlighten and gladden his friends, he blows his flute. The breeze blowing from the south pleases the atmosphere because it is fragrant and very cool. Demigods like the Gandharvas and Siddhas take advantage of this atmosphere and offer prayers to Krishna by sounding their bugles and drums. Krishna is very kind to the inhabitants of Rajabhumi, Vrindavan, and when he returns with his cows and friends, he is remembered as the lifter of Govardhan Hill. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the most exalted demigods like Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva come down to offer their evening prayers, and they accompany the cowherd boys in glorifying the qualities of Krishna. Krishna is compared with the moon, born in the ocean of the womb of Devaki. When he returns in the evening, it appears that he is fatigued, but he still tries to gladden the inhabitants of Vrindavan by his auspicious presence. When Krishna returns garlanded with flowers, his face looks beautiful. He walks into Vrindavan with a stride, just like the elephant, and slowly enters his home. Upon his return, the men, women, and cows of Vrindavan immediately forget the scorching heat of the day. There we have it again. Krishna is the rain cloud. When you see Krishna, I love these analogies that Bhaktivedanta puts in here, like when Krishna comes, it lights up. We read a few stories back about Krishna walking through a forest, it lights up the forest. Or, the relief that Krishna brings the residents of Vrindavan, the relief that Krishna brings the living entity by his presence, through his presence as the deity or his presence as Krishna's names, so the presence of Krishna's pastimes, Krishna Katha. So many wonderful things that you can experience Krishna and the relief of the scorching heat of the material existence.
Such descriptions of Krishna's transcendental pastimes and activities were remembered by the Gopis during his absence from Vrindavan. They give us some idea of Krishna's attraction. Everyone and everything is attracted to Krishna. That is a perfect description of Krishna's attraction. It's even the meaning of his name, most attractive. The example of the gopis is very instructive to persons who are trying to be absorbed in Krishna consciousness. One can very easily associate with Krishna simply by remembering his transcendental pastimes. Everyone has a tendency to love someone. That Krishna should be the object of love is the central point of Krishna consciousness. By constantly chanting the Hare Krishna mantra and remembering the transcendental pastimes of Krishna, one can be fully in Krishna consciousness and thus make his life sublime and fruitful. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 34th chapter of Krishna, the Gopis' feelings of separation. This is such a wonderful story. It's always a wonderful story, but just to read this over is so moving. But that's the thing. It's not wrong to love people. In fact, Jesus Christ said in his prayer, in his instructions to his disciples, the most important, because he was asked what is the most important commandment of God, and he took two places in the Bible, the Old Testament. One was that you should love the Lord your God, and the other that you should love your neighbor as yourself. But he made it very important to understand, because oftentimes this instruction of love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind and your neighbor as yourself is misunderstood, and people think that we need to love each other, but they leave out the part of loving God. It's not that it's not important to love God, to love people, but it's also very difficult to love people if you do not understand the transcendental nature of the living entity, and also in relationship with the Supreme Lord. So he said, my first and foremost commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind and soul. And then like unto it, love your neighbor as yourself. So if you love the Supreme Lord, just like you water the root of a tree, all the leaves will naturally fructify and grow. You cannot make leaves grow by watering it. No matter how hard we try, trying to love our brothers without loving God, it's very difficult. It just hasn't happened. But we can do that with the understanding that all God's children are God's children of God. They belong to God, and they are illusioned in the material world as being what they are at that time, whether it's a bird or a human, but they don't know their true nature. This can be taught through bhakti yoga, through the hearing and chanting of Krishna's names. One can understand, and through the grace of the spiritual master, one can understand their true nature and their relationship with Krishna. And this is like the cooling rain. It is the cooling rain. It is the only means by which we can have a peaceful world. People are so distraught by how we can. They feel hopeless because we constantly engage in the most horrific activity towards each other. But it's not surprising when we are living and we are cultivating an existence in this material world that this is our home. This is who we are. We are the center. You should gratify your senses to the best you can. You should get more for yourself. You should cultivate the desire of material enjoyment. And this is what really ultimately brings about war, hatred, unhappiness. And it's directly linked to this illusion of us being the body and the mind. That's the bottom line. We are spiritual in essence. We belong to God as loving servants. This is our true nature. This is what we need to cultivate in this life, especially in a human form of life when we have the capability of doing that. and helping the other living entities by chanting Krishna's names, by giving prasadam, by helping people remember their identity. The power of the holy name to hear just one time is changes. It's so powerful. You can't underestimate the power of that. Even if a person externally appears disgusted by it, if they hear it, it's there in their heart already. That remembrance will come and fructify eventually. So this is very, very wonderful. And by the chanting, constant chanting of Hare Krishna mantra, remembering the transcendental pastimes of Krishna, one can be fully in Krishna consciousness and thus make his life sublime and fruitful. That's all we need in this material world. That's all we need. They should be passing laws. Let's have kirtan. It's like, using social media to, people chanting Krishna's names. And what a change it would be. We wouldn't be living in a perfect world because this is the material world and it's not our home. But we would be living in a much more peaceful world than we live in right now. So thank you very much. Feel free to, like I said, if you have anyone you know who would enjoy these stories, please share my page to them, have them like and subscribe. And we're going to chant some more. Hari Bol. Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Nityananda, 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 Hari Bol, Chaitanya, 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 Hari Bol, Nityananda, 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 Hari Bol, Chaitanya, 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 Hari Bol, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Gopala Govinda Rama, Madana Rama, Gopala Govinda Rama, Madana Moana, Gopala Govinda Rama, Madana Moana, Gopala Govinda Rama, Madana Moana, Hare Krishna, Okay, that's all for today. We'll see you next time for another exciting story from Krishna book. Haribol.